Welcome to my most disappointing books of 2022. This is one of those videos that is very controversial because a lot of booktubers really debate whether this is a kind of video that we want to include on our channel. And I feel the need to justify myself just a little bit, so bear with me here. I included this video because I think that it's important that you understand both my tastes and my integrity as a reviewer. If I'm going to tell you about the books that I really like, I want you to also trust my opinions when I tell you that I have not liked books. I also want you to understand that this is not a video to rag on these authors because a lot of these books are by authors that I really love. Most of the books that appear on this list are actually because of expectations. And I had too high of expectations for what this book should have been based off of the previous series or based off of their previous work or based off the hype that I heard around it. I could take these books off this list at some future point, but these are the books that I view as the 8 most disappointing books of 2022. At number 8, we have The Extinction Trials by A.G. Riddle. I picked up this book as a just fun, good palate cleansing read. I didn't have much expectations for it, but what was truly spectacularly disappointing about this book was that it was so impressively forgettable. I even forgot what was happening from chapter to chapter while I was reading the book. I would have to go back and reread, which is very unusual for me, especially because this isn't a very philosophical book. It should be a very easy to get through book. Because of that, this book has to be on my list. I haven't read a book that was this forgettable in a very long time. So coming in at number 7 is Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. Mandel. I know it's kind of a shocker. A lot of people really like this book, but I was not one of them. This is the first book I read by this author, and I was really surprised because this book came across to me as a little bit lazy maybe, or a cop-out in terms of the ending. I feel really bad saying that. I really want to give her a second chance. I really do plan on reading her book Station 11. I think that in terms of this trope, there are tons of books out there that have done this exact same thing better. And she didn't add much to this genre. It wasn't a generally enjoyable book for me because it was so obviously predictable, and I don't know what to say. I did not enjoy it. I'm so sorry. Coming in at number 6, we have a surprise, Terminal Shock by Neal Stephenson. I'm very shocked by this because I am a huge Neal Stephenson fan. One of his books appears in my best books of all time. I mean, he was the one that got me into science fiction in the first place. More on that in another video. But I picked this book up assuming this was going to be a spectacular read, and it was a big disappointment. Again, maybe due to expectations. I didn't really enjoy these characters. I really didn't like this plot idea. I really didn't think that the beginning, middle, or end was well executed. I was really shocked. I can honestly say that this could have been the worst Neal Stephenson book I have ever read by far, and I'm really sad to say that. Moving on to number 5. Number 5, I kind of have this book as a tie, although I don't know, I'll let you decide. But this book is 2 books at the end of the series of Becky Chambers' Record of the Spaceborne Few and The Galaxy and the Ground Within. These are the book number 3 and book number 4 in her Wayfarer series. I loved book number 1 and book number 2. I thought book number 2 was even better than book number 1, and I really like a lot of her novellas. I am a huge Becky Chambers fan, so it was really hard for me to put these books on this list. Both of these books were terrible and, in my opinion, very disappointing. I had expected, since they were all in a series, to follow or come back to our main characters that we had been following from the beginning. I had really expected it to be kind of in the same vein. I had wanted just a little bit more of a plot, and I knew what I was getting into from book 1 and book 2, and yet I was really just disappointed in this whole idea of slice of life science fiction. It just didn't carry me along. I didn't really care about these characters. I think I would have had better expectations if these weren't considered part of the Wayfarer series, but since they were, and it's the alleged conclusion of the Wayfarer series, and yet we didn't even revisit our favorite characters, I had such a hard time with these books. Oh, man, I know what Becky Chambers is capable of, and I'm really sad about this. Book number 4 is Golden Enclaves by Naomi Novik. I am heartbroken to include this book on this list. I have guesses as to what happened and why, but I'm not sure if I'm right. I can tell you that the first 2 books in this series of the Schoolmance were awesome. They had me riveted on the edge of my seat. I loved everything about them, and they were fun, guilty pleasures. However, I was so excited about reading this book. I pre-ordered it, and I got it the day it came out, and I was so excited to check it out. And I felt very disappointed by this book. I felt like the author may have written herself into a corner. I feel like she maybe took to heart too many of the political complaints maybe that were sent her way on the series. I'm not really sure what happened. Poor Naomi just didn't finish this book in the way that I thought she would have. And I felt like it could have been a really strong ending. I saw the glimmers of what could have been in this book. I don't know. I feel like maybe she was pressured and it wasn't what I was hoping it would be. So definitely have to include it on this list. And it's definitely from faded expectations of what I really wanted this book to be. Book number 3 is probably no surprise to many of you, but that book is The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells. I read this as part of my Reading the Science Fiction Classics project. I was really interested in reading something from H.G. Wells as I have never read anything by him, and I was really disappointed in this book because there was so much potential. You could have done so much with the idea of a gentleman who invented invisibility. What does he do with that invisibility? You could have had him do good things. You could have had him see the world in a different way. You could have had him do bad or morally bad things and have him learn throughout the book. You could have done so many things with this plot. And what did H.G. Wells do with this plot? Had him check into a hotel. All he does is check into a hotel. Why? I don't understand. I was so incredibly disappointed with this book. It was one of those huge, epic potential wasters that I just can't get over. Will probably always be one of my worst of lists of all time. My number 2, kind of a shock because it wasn't a sci-fi or a fantasy book. It is a book called Thousand Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. This is a just general modern lit book that was supposed to take place in the Middle East about 2 different women who were married to the same man. And I had never read Kite Runner and I had never read this book. And so I decided to pick it up because why not? I'm trying to expand my horizons a little bit, and I was incredibly disappointed. I ended up DNFing this book because it was one of the most all-time depressing books, and I wasn't learning anything about their culture. I just wanted to stop everything about everything. I really did not like this book. I really don't want to take my brain or mind or go to this place. I'm not a big, sad disappointment person, and so I did not like it. I will leave it at that. And my number 1 most disappointing book for 2021, to I'm sure no surprise of any of you, is the book Man in the High Castle by Philip K. Dick. I think that this book had one of the coolest premises of all time. This book shoulda, coulda, woulda been magic, been beautiful, been a masterpiece. This book had so much epic potential. PKD made some poor life choices. Apparently he did too many drugs. He just kissed this away and let it ride into the wind. I apologize if you really liked this book, but I hated it. I don't like thinking that intentional vagueness is mistaken for philosophical genius. I don't think that he did even half of what this book could have been. And I've heard, as I haven't read, but I've heard that he has so many really intense, complex philosophical ideas, and yet this book did nothing. We have a old school American antiquity. We have an amazing setup of this book. We have an all-time epic plot ending where if you go look on, Spark Notes or something, this book should have, could have, would have been my magnum opus, my most favorite book. And instead, he does nothing with this book. Instead, the character makes no growth. We have no major discoveries by any of the characters. There is no big resistance or rebellion. There is nothing. I really was epically let down by this book. So this book is probably not something you'll ever be able to convince me to read again. So that does it for my 8 worst reads of 2022. And 4 of those were in 2022 published. So that doesn't lead us well as far as a good publishing year for me. Let me know in the comments down below what books were your worst reads of 2022 so I can stay away from them. Until next time.